Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be taking a look at 3 of the most twisted cases with you. There are certain criminal cases that of course sound horrible, but can be easily or quickly forgotten. But there are some other criminal cases that grab global attention and keep people in awe of the level of wickedness and harm a human being can cause and inflict on other humans. This is the story of a marriage that ended with a grievous and downright evil murder. It's the story of Saltanat Nukenova. Saltanat Nukenova was a beautiful 31-year-old young woman born on the 15th of May 1992. She was full of life, and her brother described her as someone who was determined and a joy to be around. She could even be seen dancing in most of her videos. In her city of Astana, she was a famous astrologer known for making some of the most accurate predictions, and at that point, she was making an equivalent of $6,780 per month. She also had a very successful Instagram blog, and all her clients and followers only had good things to say about her. She was eventually married to Candy Bishimbayev. Candy Bishimbayev is a 44-year-old Kazakh man who came from a very powerful family. He is an ex-minister of the national economy of Kazakhstan, where he served from the 6th of May 2016 to the 28th of December 2016. To put it simply, at one point, this man controlled the entire economy of the country. Just to show you how influential he was, you should know that Bishimbayev previously took on the role of Vice Minister of Trade and Economic Development, and was also appointed as an assistant to Kazakhstan's president. Although December 2015, in what can be considered one of Kazakhstan's most high-profile corruption cases, he was found guilty of bribery and embezzlement and received a 10-year prison sentence. He was later on pardoned by the president and released from jail. Saltanat Nukenova wasn't Bishimbayev's first love. He had been married twice before. His first wife had killed herself, and he had 3 children from a second marriage that ended in divorce. Those who knew him and worked for him described him as someone who oppressed others and as a hostile and very demeaning person. You might be wondering how these 2 opposite people met and fell in love. Well, it all started when one of Bishimbayev's female friends told him that there is an amazing astrologer in Astana who she had an appointment with, and that this astrologer makes the most accurate predictions. Bishimbayev was into astrology and predictions, so he went to Saltanat's Instagram page to see who this amazing astrologer was, and he definitely loved what he saw. He felt she was a really gorgeous and beautiful young lady. At that time, Saltanat had a boyfriend, so this discouraged Bishimbayev from going after her heart. Saltanat's relationship status didn't stop Bishimbayev from admiring her. He frequently checked her Instagram page until after a while, when he noticed that she and her boyfriend had gotten engaged. He just accepted that she already belonged to someone else and forgot about her. But Bishimbayev saw another opportunity arise for him to have this beautiful woman in his life. That same female friend told him that Saltanat and her fiancé were no longer together and that they had broken up. Candy didn't let this opportunity slide. He immediately told another one of his female friends to book him an appointment with this astrologer, which his friend was happy to do. It seemed she wasn't interested in taking any appointments, probably due to the recent heartbreak, because Candy later goes on to tell his female friend who was close to Saltanat that he was interested in her. He asked the female friend to book an appointment with Saltanat just so he could talk to her. While Candy's friend was at her reading appointment with Saltanat, she started a video call with him so he could talk to Saltanat personally. He asked if he could have an appointment with her, and although she agreed, the appointment never really held because Saltanat kept on avoiding him and kept on putting off the appointment saying, "She's really busy." A man like Candy Bishimbayev wouldn't give up so easily. He kept on trying to arrange an appointment, and then finally told Saltanat directly that he wasn't actually interested in her astrology, but he just really wanted to get to know her and go on a date with her. Saltanat didn't respond to this message from Candy until after 3 days, and she finally agreed to go on a date with him. Fast forward to the date, Saltanat was a little reserved because she was still hurt and healing from her previous heartbreak. She wasn't sure she was ready to give out her heart yet again. Even with this fact, they ended up spending over 5 hours talking, and they seemed to be getting along quite well. At the end of their date, Saltanat was dropped home, but before they went their separate ways, they shared their first kiss. Quandic saw this as a ray of hope that there was a possibility for him and this woman who had won his heart to become a couple. Quandic asked Saltanat out on many more dates, but for many of them, he was met with rejections. She told him she wasn't ready to start dating again because her breakup with her ex was still fresh, and she still needed some more time to heal. Despite saying this, Saltanat seemed to also have fallen in love with Quandic because she would usually call him sometimes for a meetup. This went on till fall of 2022, when Quandic asked Saltanat to go on a trip with him. The trip was for 20 days, and Quandic saw this as a great opportunity for them to bond better. It was during this trip that Quandic told Saltanat that he wasn't looking for a girlfriend, but a wife. Quandic went on that trip with her because he was sure he wanted to marry Saltanat, but he needed to know if she was on the same page as him. The trip was going really well, both were having a really good time, so Quandic went ahead to propose to Saltanat. The young astrologer was already smitten at this point, so she of course agreed to marry Quandic. Things moved on pretty fast from there. The couple saw each other's families, and Saltanat even moved in with Quandic. By December 2022, Quandic and Saltanat had a very intimate wedding and legally became husband and wife. All seemed to be going well with the couple, but a tragic turn of events just about a year later reveals that everything wasn't so rosy in the couple's marriage. Just around March 2023, some proof of possible physical abuse began to surface. The couple hadn't even been married for up to a year. Saltanat's brother Aitbek Amangeldi received a very heartbreaking text from her. What he saw shocked him to his bones. She sent him a picture of her beaten and bruised face. She told him to hold on to the picture and not tell anyone anything about it. She wanted her brother to keep the picture with him because she knew her husband usually goes through her phone and he would delete it if he saw it. Upon seeing the picture, Aitbek got really upset. This was his little sister with bruises all over her face, which were obviously from beatings around her face. He tried calling Saltanat several times, but she didn't pick up. He ended up calling Quandic and asked him why his sister had a bruised and beaten face. Quandic invited Aitbek over to his house in order to have a conversation with him. Aitbek was holding a knife, ready to harm Quandic, but upon getting to the house, Aitbek didn't meet either Saltanat or Quandic. He instead met two of Quandic's children there. Aitbek tried to inquire from the children and find out where his sister and brother-in-law were, but the children also weren't aware of their location. Aitbek eventually called Quandic's mother to find out if she knew the whereabouts of Saltanat and her son. Quandic's mother suggested that Aitbek check Saltanat's apartment, which was just about an apartment away from Quandic's. Aitbek finds Quandic at Saltanat's apartment, and they end up having a physical fight. He goes on to look for his sister, and after knocking the door of her room several times, he didn't get any response. He breaks down the door and finds her inside. When he sees her, he realized the bruises had healed, which meant the picture she sent him wasn't a recent one. He told his sister to pack all her things immediately, cause he was leaving with her. He couldn't imagine leaving his sister with an abuser. Saltanat unfortunately refused to leave. She told her brother that she would rather save her marriage. Aitbek tried to forcefully take Saltanat away from her home, which led to them having a fight. This affected the relationship between the brother and sister and forced Saltanat to keep everything to herself, not revealing anything to him anymore. Even more, Quandic's ex-wife had called the police. This was because her children, who were in the house when Aitbek came to look for Quandic, called her to say they were scared because they saw Aitbek with a knife and they thought he was going to harm them. Quandic's ex-wife ensured the police issued Saltanat and her family a restraining order and stopped them from being around the kids. This really angered Saltanat, and further affected her relationship with her brother. She said she loved those kids and had already formed a bond with them, especially Quandik's 10-year-old daughter. Saltanat was really upset with her brother Aitbek for causing a scene, and she was scared the entire situation would give Quandik and his ex-wife more grounds to cause her pain. Aitbek still kept on trying to convince his sister, Saltanat, to leave her husband's house. He mentioned to her that Quandik could end up killing her if she stayed with him, but she didn't listen and decided to fight for her marriage. Quandik and Saltanat had several fights after that, but she still kept on going back to him. A letter was later on found during the investigation of the case where Saltanat wrote to Quandik saying she was hurt by him for betraying her, and he didn't even apologize for his betrayal. The letter showed that Saltanat was being emotionally, psychologically, and physically abused in the relationship. Quandik was cheating on her with different women, and wherever she tried to confront him, he would resort to beating her rather than taking responsibility. Eventually, Saltanat decided to leave Quandik for good. She went back to her hometown and stayed for a while with her parents. Her parents were very supportive of her and encouraged her to leave if she felt the need to. They told her she could go ahead to get a divorce if the marriage wasn't working for her, and that she didn't need to feel embarrassed or guilty for her decision. Saltanat seemed to have received her parents' advice, and they thought she was actually going to divorce Quandik, but they later found out through Saltanat's Instagram posts that she had gone back to make amends with her husband in Astana. It was obvious Saltanat was finding it very hard to stay away from this toxic marriage. She was in love with Quandik and felt he would eventually change. On November 8, 2023, Saltanat told Quandik that one of her friends got a concert ticket for them, and she'd really love to go for the concert. She also asked Quandik to join them at the concert. He initially refused, but after she pressed a bit more, he eventually agreed to go with them. Later that day, Saltanat was trying on some outfits for the concert, but she didn't have most of her clothes at Quandik's apartment because she already packed them to her parents' house in her hometown. Quandik offered that they go shop for more outfits, which she agreed to. They went out, and he bought her lots of clothes, particularly suits, because he said they looked good on her. After the shopping, Quandik dropped Saltanat off at the restaurant his family owned. It was a restaurant across the street from the House of Ministries called BAU Restaurant, and it's known for its VIP rooms and karaoke. Quandik dropped Saltanat off at the restaurant while she waited for her friend and prepared for the concert. They eventually went for the concert, but no one was sure what occurred there because the couple returned to the restaurant in a really flustered mood. It was later revealed that Quandik was seen flirting with another woman right in front of Saltanat. He kissed the woman on the cheek and walked away with her. This led Saltanat to tears and made her decide that she would leave Quandik for sure now. These were all witnessed by her friend, who attended the concert with her. After the concert, from the CCTV camera footage, the couple can be seen walking in for a late dinner at around 1 a.m. Saltanat can be seen on the CCTV camera wearing her big black puffer jacket, her pantsuit, and she's standing near one of the building entrances, resting back up against the wall with her purse just sitting on the ground. From her facial expression, you can tell she's very exhausted. Her husband is standing in front of her, and he, on the other hand, looks very energetic. His posture is upright, and he's standing right in front of her. He's holding a cigarette in one hand, and on the other one he's cupping his wife's face. Whoever passes by at this point might see this as a romantic gesture, but this is more of a controlling and predatory action. If you take a closer look at the camera footage, you'd notice that she was trying to look away, but he kept on forcing her to look at him. He reaches up his other hand with a lit cigarette and forcibly grabs her face with both of his hands and forces her to look at him. We can now fully see her face in the camera, and she looks terrified. They were at this restaurant all night long, and another 6 hours later at 7:16 a.m. The CCTV camera captures the couple in the hallway. Saltanat is now completely naked, but she is wearing the same big black puffer jacket to cover her nudity. They both are seen walking through the restaurant. She's walking a few steps behind her husband, and she briefly stops in front of one of the mirrors on the wall. It looks like she's analyzing the bruises on her face. She keeps walking to catch up with her husband, and 2 seconds later, Quandic grabs his wife by her hair and throws her onto the ground in the hallway. When she hits the ground, her jacket flips open and she's barely covered, lying right there on the floor. Quandic stands over his wife's limp body on the ground, and then he lifts his right dominant leg up and kicks his wife very hard multiple times. He's kicking her so hard and with so much force that he has to hold onto a table to keep his balance. The camera footage shows Saltanat on the ground, trying to cover her body, but he's aiming and kicking her naked private area. But he isn't done yet, because he grabs her by a fist full of her hair, yanks her up with so much force, and throws her up against the stone wall. At this point, she is completely unable to control her body, much less even defend herself. Quandic doesn't seem to be in any way moved by the level of torture he has inflicted on his wife. He punches her straight in the face with enough force that her head slams back and hits the wall behind her. That punch was the one the doctors said was likely to have completely shattered her nose. Her whole body slumps forward, about to fall, but Quandic holds her up, pulls her back up by her hair, and punches her once more in the face, after which she falls forward and he walks off. After taking a few steps away from her, he decides he still wants to inflict some more pain on her. He walks back, grabs Saltanat by her hair, and slams her down onto the ground. He then starts dragging her on her knees and by her hair through the hallway. Quandic shows no iota of mercy to his wife. He drags her into a closed-off restroom, and no movement can be seen on the CCTV camera anymore. Nothing is seen or heard until about 8 hours later. Apparently, Quandic had dragged Saltanat off to VIP room 1 of the restaurant, where he kept on laying heavy blows on her. Saltanat had been beaten for over 8 hours, but she didn't pass away immediately. She was left in the room to slowly die, and Quandic never tried to get her any form of medical help. Quandic makes a call across to his cousin who managed the restaurant and tells him to come to the VIP room with some blankets. At this point, the VIP room is in total disarray. There was broken furniture everywhere, everything was out of place, and obviously, there was dried blood all around the room. Quandic's cousin comes in with the blanket to cover Saltanat up and pretends like he didn't see the state she and the room were in. According to him, this wasn't the first time he had seen the room this way. He knew she usually got beaten up by her husband, but he felt it wasn't his place to advise Quandic. When later asked why he didn't call for help, Quandic Bishimbayev simply said, "It was because Vladimir Putin would be in town." Quandic goes back to check on Saltanat in the VIP room and realized she didn't have a pulse. He tells his cousin that Saltanat was just sleeping and instructs him to delete all CCTV footage from the previous night. He starts panicking, and rather than call an ambulance, he calls his trusted psychic. When she picks up, he tells her he's scared because his wife isn't moving or breathing. The psychic tells Quandic that his wife would be okay, she just needs some sleep, but he can take her to a hospital if he chooses. He tells the psychic that he doesn't want to take Saltanat to the hospital, but she should come take a look herself. Quandic finally calmed down after the psychic told him his wife would definitely be okay and she just needs to sleep till evening, after which she'd wake up in her right senses. Some hours later, Quandic is still inside the restaurant, but he's having lunch with another woman, and this is at around 3:30 p.m. He acts as if nothing happened and everything is fine. It even looks like the meeting with this woman is more of a date. He was in VIP room 5 with his date, while his wife was dying, or probably dead by now, in VIP room 1. It turns out that this woman Quandic was on a date with was probably his mistress. Many say she looked very much like Saltanat. He in fact gave her one of the suits he bought for Saltanat the previous night to wear when leaving the restaurant, so it would look like Saltanat herself was the one who was walking out the restaurant. He even went as far as giving this woman some of the jewelry Saltanat had on. Quandic and his cousin, after noticing Saltanat still wasn't conscious, tried to wake her up by placing salt and ammonia under her nose to get a reaction. When they got no response from her, Quandic messages his psychic, who tells him that Saltanat is still conscious in her mind. As if unbothered by the current situation, Quandic then starts texting a popular sex worker and asks her when she'd be free for a meetup. Later on in the evening, after Saltanat still hadn't woken up, Quandic and his cousin call for an ambulance, but by the time the ambulance arrived, Saltanat was already dead. Her eyes were wide open. Doctors say her eye was so badly injured it leaked out. The paramedic mentioned that they had never seen anyone so badly bruised in their entire work career. She was covered with bruises all over her body. Forensic inspection also showed she still had bruises and brain trauma from various abuse in the past. Saltanat was found with deep lacerations in her skull and spine, with broken bones. But what shocked the doctors the most was that her brain showed physical trauma from months before now, which meant the physical abuse had been going on for a long time. Upon hearing the news, Saltanat's family was completely distraught. He brother rushed over to the scene, unsure of what condition his sister was in. When he realized she was dead, his heart sunk, and he broke down. He called his parents, and he could tell they had already heard the news because his mother was wailing in the background. Quandic Bishimbayev was arrested in the restaurant, but eyewitness said the police officers acted very friendly towards him, and some even supported his actions, saying his wife must have been at fault. Obviously, the ex-minister's wealth and influence was making a way for him. Saltanat's parents were not allowed to see her body because it was badly disfigured. Her mother still cries to this day that she was unable to see, hug, and kiss her daughter for a last time because of how badly Quandic abused her. Quandic was brought to court, and this murder trial is one that drew the attention of so many people globally to a lack of proper repercussions and punishment for domestic violence offenses. Quandic, during his court case, claimed that he only slapped her, and he didn't think a slap would cause her death. He claimed it was all an accident and pleaded not guilty to a deliberate and brutal murder. Quandic Bishimbayev and his family tried all they could to prevent justice from being served. They even threatened the various witnesses and the judge in charge of the case. All of Quandic's explanation to what occurred that night and the day after didn't add up. He first of all said she was drunk and the injuries she had were self-sustained. He told the court that she kept on falling by herself on the toilet while in the restroom, which is how she got the bruises on her face. It wasn't too long before the truth unfolded. The CCTV footage that Quandic and his cousin tried to clear that night later resurfaced, and that was when proper evidence about what occurred surfaced. The world was shocked by the gruesome footage where Quandic constantly battered his wife. Saltanat's brother also released the previous picture Saltanat sent to him of her bruised face. This was one of the first live-streamed murder cases in Kazakhstan, so it really caused an uproar among the nation and beyond. Millions of people from all over the world have followed this case, and it stirred up a global protest demanding that the government develops stricter laws against domestic violence. Domestic abuse is not a strange occurrence in Kazakhstan. According to the UN, there are about 400 reported cases of domestic violence yearly in the country. The protest and global uproar was successful because on April 15, 2024, the president of Kazakhstan signed a new law called the Saltanat's Law in honor of Saltanat, which stated that all cases of domestic violence must be properly investigated and, if found guilty, the offender must be punished by jail term. Quandic was finally charged for torture and murder with extreme violence and a 24 years jail term. It is quite sad that Saltanat Nukenova had to lose her life before proper justice was served. Not only did she lose her life, but she lost it after several hours of beating and torture. Her story has placed a spotlight on domestic violence in the country and also worldwide. It has proven to the world not to stay indifferent to any type of violence, and Saltanat's law is now effective in Kazakhstan. The next case we will be looking at is the Candy Family Massacre. Try to imagine the absolute terror a 10-year-old boy would have experienced after waking up in the morning and coming out of his room, only to find everyone in his family dead. Everyone but him. His father, mother, and 3 older brothers are all lying in a pool of their blood. The story we'll be talking about today is so heartbreaking and frightening, and might leave you questioning if those whom you love the most are truly safe to be around.
At this point, I just wish the nightmare would be over. I wish it was all a bad dream, and that we would wake up and that they would still be here.
Jonathan Candy's family looked just like any other normal American family. Some people might even describe them as a fitting image for the all-American family next door. They were a family of 4 boys and 2 parents. Everything looked very normal in this family. No one would have ever expected anything strange was going on behind the closed doors of the Candy family's home.
I had to see it for myself. I kept asking Cooper to please snap and text Ethan, and has he seen Ethan today? Has he talked to him? And I was calling Lindsay, and I was messaging Dylan, and nobody would respond.
They were your all-American family. This is something, I mean, I could live 100,000 lifetimes and never expect this out of that.
I could have never imagined that ever in my whole entire life, you know? And I'm still in shock.
Even their neighbors who saw and interacted with them almost every day never would have suspected anything horrible was going on in the home of the Candy family, who lived at the end of the cul-de-sac. An interview with the couple back in 2022 about one of their favorite bakery in Yukon during one Discovering Oklahoma episode showed the couple to be a young, vibrant, and happy family.
I come here twice a week in the morning just for their breakfast burritos, which are by far anything better than you can get around here. I love the carrot cake. I don't eat a lot of sweets, even with my last name, but I love the carrot cake.
I like the cannoli. The cannoli are good.
It's a tragedy that they are all gone now, leaving just the youngest son. The darkest part of this story isn't even the fact that they were all murdered. It would have been most likely easier and less painful for everyone to understand if a dangerous and armed man, or someone who just really wanted to hurt the family, broke in during the middle of the night and murdered them in cold blood. But no, that was not the case. The darkest part of this story is that the person who killed the wife and 3 children and also turned to kill himself is Jonathan Candy, and not any other person. The man who was meant to be the husband and father of the wife and children, and who was meant to support, love, and care for them. The same man that these people looked up to for safety is the same very person who took away their lives.
Him and his kids seemed like they always got along. He just was just a family man. I mean, I never expected this. We were just in total shock. Yeah. The kids were real friendly. Everybody here loved the kids. Swam here at his house regularly. They played with my dog.
Like we have families down here that they work, and he'd come over and mow their lawns and take care of the family. Anything you needed, he'd be there for you.
Jonathan Candy was a 42-year-old man from Yukon, Oklahoma. He worked as a part-time employee at the Paycom Center, one of Yukon's large arenas used to hold various events like concerts and sports tournaments. It was another basketball season, and Jonathan Candy had been spending some time working on the recent NBA games. It was the home game for the Oklahoma City Thunder, and everyone in the area was excited to see the trophy come home. Although he just worked part-time, his jokes and laughs always brought life to the arena. Jonathan Candy studied at Bishop McGuinness Catholic High School, and after he graduated, he married his sweetheart, Lindsay Terry. Lindsay grew up in Prague, Oklahoma. She was a member of the choir as a young girl, and she was always full of laughter. Jonathan Candy was the funny, goofy guy who loved to make jokes and make everyone laugh, and Lindsay Terry was the beautiful young lady who loved to laugh and was eventually swept off her feet by this goofy guy's charm and jokes. Their marriage seemed to go on smoothly. Even after many years of marriage and 4 sons, Jonathan and Lindsay Candy looked happily married. There was never any report of possible domestic violence or abuse of any sort. Their children also looked happy and lived like the average American kid. The Facebook page of the couple is filled with family photos of happy times, and anyone scrolling by would believe they were a regular, happy family. Jonathan always told his relatives and friends about how his family and children were his entire world. But then, on April 22nd, something no one could have thought or imagined occurred. The name of the Jonathan's family youngest son has been withheld for privacy reasons. But what we do know is that this little boy stepped out of his room on April 22nd, 2024, and he was expecting it to be like any other day. He didn't expect anything unusual. He slept through the night with a box fan blowing in his direction, so he couldn't have heard anything going on outside. The only thing he remembered hearing was the fire alarm that went off during the night, but he went soundly back to sleep right after that. At around 9 a.m., he stepped out of his room only to find his entire family in a pool of blood. At 9:30 a.m. on April 22nd, 2024, the 10-year-old boy called 911 and told the dispatcher that he found his entire family dead. Not too long after, the police arrived at the home of the Candy family near Southwest 29th Street and Czech Hall Road. They entered the house and were shocked by what they saw. It was nothing short of a massacre. After their inspection, they saw 39-year-old Lindsay Candy, who had been shot and killed. She was murdered along with her sons, 18-year-old Dylan Candy, 14-year-old Ethan Candy, and 12-year-old Lucas Candy. The suspected killer, 42-year-old Jonathan Candy, was also found dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. It didn't take too long to conclude that this was a case of murder-suicide, but the question on everyone's mind: why did this happen? The sole survivor was the 10-year-old who made the call to 911. Neighbors on Czech Hall Road noticed as ambulance and police vehicles began to pull up into their neighbor's home. They were confused as to what might have occurred. After some time of investigation, it was revealed that the father, Jonathan Candy, allegedly hunted down and killed his wife and children one by one, except for the youngest son. An interview with Oklahoma officials revealed that 2 of the victims' bodies were found upstairs, and the other 2 were found downstairs. There were no signs of a struggle at the crime scene, which adds more confusion to what went down. In most cases like this one, it is unusual for the killer to spare just one person and kill everyone himself. If the intention was murder-suicide, everyone present is usually a casualty. What could have occurred? Why did Jonathan Candy decide to spare the youngest son? Is it possible he came to his senses last minute? Or did he have a special relationship with this child? Unfortunately, these questions might remain unanswered because there's no one to ask these questions to. The relatives of the Candy family realize how hard this would be on the young boy, and they think it's best to leave him out of any further investigations in the meantime. Till then, this case would remain a mystery. One of the officials in charge of the investigation, Dr. Joni Johnston, a clinical and forensic psychologist, said that the entire scenario was shocking to her. She has never witnessed a case where a parent murders some of the children and lets just one live. Friends and neighbors who saw Jonathan before the murders said everything seemed just fine to them. There was nothing unusual or out of place. Jonathan's colleagues specifically mentioned that he was at the Thunder Pelicans playoff game just hours before the tragic murders occurred. Nobody is sure if there are any warning signs that the people around the family should have picked up on. There was no sign of domestic violence, which is usually a common factor in murder-suicide cases. Up till now, no one can state or rightly speculate the motive behind the murders. All we know is that there was possibly an altercation between Jonathan and Lindsay on the night of the murders. No one knows what their argument could have been about, and why Jonathan decided that the best way to deal with the situation was to kill his wife and systemically hunt down and kill 3 of his kids. He seemed like a loving and supportive father, But what would make a father put a bullet through some of the people he claimed to love the most in the world?
But something may have happened. He kills his wife and several of his kids, and then just decides to kill himself, kind of to get out of it.
One possibility, I mean, there's so many possibilities, and I think one of them that I've thought about is it's possible that he kills his wife in the heat of some altercation. They're having some argument, and he, for whatever reason, just loses it, shoots her several times, kills her, and that is not premeditated. And there is no history of depression or those things that we're talking about. And then starts thinking that I can't leave my kids to face this. You know, I could not bear the thought of my children knowing that that I murdered their mother, their father is a murderer, or I'm going to kill myself, and I can't bear the thought of my kids being left with no parents.
Ongoing investigations are trying to find out if there were any form of financial crises that the family was going through. Sometimes, financial crises in homes can lead to depression, particularly to the man who might feel the weight of the burden on his shoulders. This could result in distorted thinking and increase the chances of feeling like there's no hope and no help. Another factor investigators are considering is whether Jonathan had any form of mental health challenge that he was so good at hiding and didn't share with anyone. There's still a form of stigma around seeking help for mental health challenges, and those who don't end up seeking help usually end up making terrible mistakes that could affect their lives and the lives of those they love. Signs of depression in men are usually different from that in women. Men might not be able to mentally process well or vocally express their feelings of depression, so what they do oftentimes is to isolate themselves, and then they become irritable and edgy and express anger instead of showing sadness. Families, friends, and loved ones around them might not understand that these might be signs of depression and that the person might have suicidal tendencies. It's quite unfortunate when people don't seek help for mental health issues on time because when they enter a certain stage of depression, they lose all hope in the world and believe the best thing they can do is kill themselves and take other people with them. The actual motive behind the murders is not known, so for now, this remains a mystery to everyone. On Lindsay Candy's Facebook page, one of her childhood friends, Connie Cruz, upon hearing the news, shared some details about the friendship between her and Lindsay. She said that Lindsay and she were both choristers in church when growing up, and that they sang side by side with each other in the choir. She also mentioned that she and Lindsay attended school together until they both graduated in 2002. A particular memory Connie Cruz shared helped everyone see the bright and playful nature Lindsay had. She said that as young girls, she and Lindsay hid in a treehouse and fell asleep there. Their parents couldn't find them, became worried, and called the police. At the end of the day, everyone laughed about the situation, stating how the girls gave them a fright of their lives, only to be found asleep in a treehouse. Cruz also mentioned that she and Lindsay had a friendship they could always pick up from where it left off. She stated how devastated she had been after hearing the news of the Candy family's death. She has been unable to imagine or process the entire thing. Cruz said on the Facebook page that Lindsay was so loved and special to many people. She specifically stated how fiercely loved Lindsay was by her boys, and how she brought laughter to every conversation, and the lives of her parents, her sister, and their girl group. Dylan Candy was the first son of Jonathan and Lindsay Candy. He was a social person who didn't find it hard to make friends, and it was obvious to everyone that he had a passion for drumming and music in general. Just last year, in May 2023, he graduated from Mustang High School. He loved playing in the marching band, and he attended Oklahoma Baptist University during the semester in fall to join the Bison Brigade. The Bison Brigade was OBU's marching band, and Dylan played their first bass drum. The director of athletic bands at OBU, Brian Stackhouse, mentioned that the only reason Dylan wasn't leading any section in the band was because he was a freshman, but he was placed in the position to play the complex first bass because he was good at playing in the band. Brian Stackhouse said Dylan was an amazing young man who had a big heart. He described Dylan as someone happy at all times and who was always friendly to everyone regardless of if he was having a rough day. He was an excellent example to his peers on what it means to dedicate yourself to the team, how to work through hard situations, how to persevere, keep on showing up, and give it your absolute best. Stackhouse recalled that a core memory he had of Dylan was during band camp when he was told that he had a solo in the drum line. Dylan was so happy that he couldn't sit in one place, and he just went on with his day with so much excitement. Dylan's bandmates were encouraged to support one another as they dealt with the devastating news of his death. Dylan's bass drum and uniform would be set up as a memorial display to honor him and his family. 14-year-old Ethan Candy was the second son of the Candy family. He was a 9th grade student at Mustang North Middle School, and everyone in school knew him as this active, athletic young boy who was good at baseball. Ethan's coach said he was a very energetic and committed player who had a natural talent for the game and always played with so much gladness and intensity. He said Ethan had an inspiring spirit and a smile that could lighten people's mood. His coach, T.J. Armstrong, was quite fond of Ethan. He was best friends with his son, and he believed he brought out the best in his son. He would usually call him Sweet Candy Man. Cooper Armstrong and Wyatt Livesey, Ethan's best friends, as well as his other friends, have been unable to fully process the loss of Ethan. A memorial bench is being set up at the Mustang Youth Sports Complex to honor his presence in their lives and the team. Lucas Candy was the youngest victim of the murders. He was 12 years old and was a student at Meadowbrook Intermediate. He was always seen playing around with the other young children during Ethan's soccer practice. He was full of life and was an active, smart kid. He would be remembered as a bright, joyful kid who loved to play outdoors and make new friends. One of the saddest parts of this tragic story is the fact that the youngest child and sole survivor of the Candy family would have to grow up knowing that his entire family was murdered by his father. At 10 years old, he's already set to face a future where he grows up without his immediate family. No dad, no mom, no siblings. In just one night, his entire life changed, and those whom he called family were no more. He might grow up needing closure of what happened, and sadly, might not be able to find an answer. This is a burden too heavy to be placed on a 10-year-old child with his entire future ahead of him. He has been placed in the care of extended family members, and people in the community are coming together to show him as much support as possible to help him deal with this difficult reality. Social workers have been assigned to work closely with the family to make sure he receives every necessary emotional and psychological support. A GoFundMe has been set up for him, and people have been encouraged to give as much as they can to assist with his upkeep, education, and future needs. The support that has been received so far from the community has been very heartwarming and overwhelming, proving to the only surviving Candy son and their other family members that they are not alone in these painful times. No one ever saw this coming. This is one reason why the news is so shocking to those who knew the family. At the local station KF, Jonathan's family released a statement where they expressed how truly confused and devastated they were. They said they have so many questions they won't ever have answers to. One of Candy's family neighbors, 68-year-old Michael Burcham, said that it's hard for him to believe that his neighbors are no more and that he already misses them. Another neighbor, Brian Graham, mentioned how handy and helpful Jonathan was around the neighborhood. T.J. Armstrong, Ethan's coach, said he chooses to remember Jonathan Candy as that great guy he always knew him as. Someone who was always thankful and was always giving hugs. His wife, Rhonda Armstrong, who had known the Candy family for over 3 years, said that whenever she went to their house or they came over, she never could stop smiling and laughing. They could make her forget about her bad day at work or her life struggles the moment she saw their smiles. She said Lindsay was always at Ethan's baseball game, with the loudest cheer as they played the games. Everyone who knew them saw them as a kind, sweet, and happy family, which made the idea of what happened to them even harder to believe. Investigators are trying to do a thorough search to find clues of whatever might have led up to Jonathan's drastic actions. They are trying to examine his interactions with friends and family to identify any possibility of a poor mental state. But because there have been no previous pointers to poor mental health, it has been particularly frustrating to figure out a clear motive behind his actions. However, authorities are using this incident as an avenue to inform people about the importance of seeking help in any case of mental health issues. They emphasize the fact that there is a need to break every stigma connected with seeking help. Jonathan Candy's case just goes further to show how those who seem happy and all right on the outside could be dealing with some deep inner trauma. Everyone is going through one thing or the other, so we need to learn to be compassionate with people we meet and take some time to connect and talk to our family and friends to ensure there is no buildup of negative emotion. Authorities have offered to help people who might be struggling to process their emotions or the news of Candy's family death by giving them access to support groups and counseling services. This seems like an absolute nightmare. Everyone wishes they would just wake up from. The Candy family were loved by many and would forever be dear in their hearts. As family and friends grieve the death of Jonathan, Lindsay, Dylan, Ethan, and Lucas Candy, they also realize that the priority at a time like this is to ensure the survivor of the Candy family receives as much support and love as possible. The next case we will be looking at is the Wickramasinghe family massacre in Ottawa. What happens when a family reunion suddenly takes an unexpectedly fatal turn, switching it from a heartwarming one to a disunion in cold blood? Let's find out in this heartbreaking story of a family reunion without a happy ending, one that questions the act of hospitality.
They lived here in the townhouse where late Wednesday night, police found 6 people dead, including 35-year-old Darshani Delanthika Akanayaki and her 4 young children.
Danushka Wickramasinghe lived in the Ottawa suburb of Barhaven. He was employed at a mobile company in Sri Lanka, but he left there and arrived in Canada in July 2021 to pursue a higher education and had recently established a cleaning company. He had spent several lonely years in Canada working to establish himself before reuniting last summer with his wife, Darshani Ekanyake. At the time of the reunion, they had 3 young children together. Inuka and Ashwini attended Monsignor Paul Baxter School on Beatrice Drive, a 5-minute walk from the house. The youngest daughter, Kelly, was born in Ottawa, Canada, where the family lived. It was a typical family where the man of the house leaves his home and travels to another country for brighter and bigger opportunities, hoping to establish himself and get a house before his family reunites with him in their new neighborhood. All Danushka wanted was to be a provider for his loving young family, but life had other plans for him. Last summer came the happy reunion with his wife, Darshani Ekanyake, who was a teacher, and their 3 children. Months later, they had a baby girl named Kelly, and the arrival of the newborn brought so much joy to the family.
That city's worst ever mass killing. 5 members of one family and an acquaintance all died Wednesday night.
Danushka Wickramasinghe, he thought his days of living alone in Ottawa were behind him. But on one Wednesday, a horrible nightmare began to develop at the other side of Wickramasinghe's front door. Canada became the place where a terrifying tragedy would occur on March 6, 2024. This was the day when the peace and quiet of a neighborhood house was disturbed by an act of violence that left everyone in total shock. The Wickramasinghe home is one that was once filled with the innocent laughter of children, but this night it was replaced with a creepy and deadly silence that expressed the depth of the loss. This has been a case that has shaken not just Ottawa, but the entire nation of Canada. It is a day everyone in the region has marked as the day of the horrifying killing of the Wickramasinghe family. While Danushka Wickramasinghe sustained serious injuries, his wife, Darshani Delanthika Ekanayake, who was 35 years old, Inuka Wickramasinghe, his 7-year-old son, his first daughter Ashwini Wickramasinghe, who was 4 years old, 2-year-old Ranaya Wickramasinghe, his second daughter, the family's infant Kelly Wickramasinghe, who was just 2.5 months, and Gamini Amarakun Mudiansalag, 40 years old family friend, were brutally murdered. The investigators involved in the case said Danushka was found outside the house yelling for help and was taken to the hospital where he was reported to be in a serious but stable condition. The police reported that the bodies of his wife, 4 children, and an acquaintance were then found inside the home. The 6th individual, who was found dead, was 40-year-old Gamini Amarakun Mudiansalaj. According to the police, he was an acquaintance of the family who recently arrived in Canada and had been living at the Wickramasinghe home. Darshani Delanthika Ekanayake, 35, was formerly a student at Maliadeva Balika Vidyalaya and an alumna of Colombo University. She was employed at St. Benedict Model School in Polgahawela. She was among the 6 people fatally attacked in a suburban townhome in the Ottawa community of Barhaven on Wednesday night, in what police described as the worst mass killing in the city's history. Her 4 children, including an infant, were also killed, as was an adult acquaintance of the family who was living with them. Darshani's husband, 38-year-old Danushka Wickramasinghe, was wounded but survived. Jayantha Ekanayake, her mother, aged 66, stated that she sensed something was off the last time she spoke to her daughter, Darshani, on Wednesday night, the 6th of March. The two phoned each other every evening, Darshani in her home in Ottawa, her mother in Polgahawela, located 2 hours outside the Sri Lankan city of Colombo. Their conversation on Wednesday was unusually brief, just 5 minutes. Ms. Ekanayake felt something was weighing on her daughter's mind, but they didn't speak about it. She asked me to go to sleep, Ms. Ekanayake recalled. She was planning to visit her daughter in 2 months to see her and her grandchildren. Her worry grew when she didn't hear from Darshani on Thursday night. The next morning, when Ms. Ekanayake heard from a local news outlet about a Sri Lankan family that had been killed in Ottawa, she knew immediately it was her daughter's, she said. Ms. Ekanayake said her daughter, son-in-law, and their 3 oldest children were newcomers to Canada from Sri Lanka. Kelly, the youngest, was born in Canada. They were seeking work, she said, and good education for the children. Darshani was a devoted Buddhist who rejected the pull of materialism, Ms. Ekanayake said, adding that before leaving for Canada, she had donated piles of her belongings to another family after a flood. More recently, she asked her mother to donate a child's bicycle she had left behind when she emigrated. She was a kind, loving, and peaceful young lady, looking out for her parents and her children.
Police have arrested Fabio de Zoisa, who also lived in the home. He has now appeared in court, charged with 6 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of attempted murder.
As much as old age doesn't always depict wisdom, young age doesn't also always depict innocence. Following through with the story of the killing of the young Wickramasinghe family, it would have been safe to assume that they were brutally murdered by a much more mature person who probably had scores to settle with the family, or probably a drunk guest who was just recovering from the death of a loved one. Unfortunately, the perpetrator of this evil act was a 19-year-old boy, one who was generously accommodated by Danushka Wickramasinghe. What connects Danushka to Fabio de Zoisa? Initially, Mr. Wickramasinghe was studying and residing at a boarding house with de Zoisa. However, when the young man was asked to vacate his boarding accommodations by the landlord, it was Mr. Wickramasinghe who had offered him lodging in the basement of his home a few months prior. He was known for posting videos of the video game Minecraft on YouTube. His YouTube account has now been taken down. A spokesperson for Google, which owns YouTube, said via email that following the tragic attack in Ottawa, the Trust and Safety Team identified and terminated a YouTube channel associated with the suspect by the Creator Responsibility Guidelines. He stated that if a user's off-platform behavior harms the YouTube community, they may take action. The man behind the mask, the alleged murderer, was a 19-year-old former Algonquin college student. This unassuming young man, who once walked the halls of a respected educational institution, stands accused of the tragic crime that has saddened the hearts of people throughout Ottawa and beyond. He is also a Sri Lankan national and now faces 6 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of attempted murder. It was reported and confirmed that the family even celebrated his birthday together some months before. They got him cheesecake because he said he liked it, just to make his birthday memorable.
Like a family moving from Sri Lanka to here with such a young family with young kids, they probably had a lot of hopes and dreams. So it's very sad.
Mr. Dhanuska Wickramasinghe had also met the suspect's parents in Sri Lanka. Mr. Dhanuska Wickramasinghe arrived home around 10:30 p.m. and found Dezoisa with a knife, according to Sumanarathana, the resident monk and director of the Hilda Jayawardanaramaya Buddhist monastery. He wrestled with his assailant, then he felt the sting of a knife or other edged weapon slashing across his face. The police later called it a knife-like weapon. He was also stabbed in the chest and in the back, and at least one of his fingers was cut off. Blood was everywhere. Inside, his entire family was already dead, including the family friend.
I cannot say he's doing well, but he's a little bit stronger than we thought, and he's with some injuries and mentally he's in great shock.
During the attack, Wickramasinghe begged Febrio Dezoisa not to harm his family and asked if he had harmed them in any way. Febrio said no, and that was a lie. Wickramasinghe then discovered the bodies of his family, according to Sumanarathana, and locked himself in a room due to shock, fear, and deep worry. Later, he ran back outside, screaming, bleeding, inconsolable. Neighbors summoned the police, who arrived a few minutes later and subdued the attacker. The police arrived around 10:52 p.m., and Dezoisa was arrested shortly before 11 p.m. At 11:17 p.m., Ottawa police stated that day on social media that there was a police operation ongoing in the 300th block of Berrigan Drive and to avoid the area. On Thursday, March 7th, around 2:30 a.m., the Ottawa police said on social media that the OPS was on the scene of a homicide, with multiple victims confirmed deceased. They also stated that one additional person had been taken to an Ottawa area hospital with serious but non-life-threatening injuries. One arrest had been made, and there was no continued threat to public safety.
Shock, and I can't explain it. It's tough.
Did you know them?
No, I didn't, but I mean, I'm seeing it, seeing the guys in their white suits and everything. It's more real now.
At 6:15 a.m., the police said in a press release that the homicide unit was investigating the deaths of 6 people who were found at the address the night prior. The victims were identified as 2 adults and 4 children. Police said their identities had not been confirmed as of that time, calling it a tragic and complex investigation.
I want to emphasize, this was a senseless act of violence perpetrated on purely innocent people.
Ottawa Police Chief Eric Stubbs told CBC Radio that the homicide was a mass shooting, but later in the day corrected his statement to say it was a mass killing. The police held a press conference at 1:30 p.m. They identified the victims and said charges had been laid against Dezoisa. At the police press conference, Stubbs told the reporters that the police believe an edged weapon with sharp edges like a knife was used in the killings. While some murderers have motives behind their ruthless actions, others perform a senseless act of murder without reason and cause. Bhante Sunitha, who was a resident monk and director of the Hilda Jayawardanaramaya Buddhist monastery, said that all was not well with Febrio Dezoisa. He had dropped out of school and also had thoughts of suicide. A spokesperson for Algonquin College confirmed that Dezoisa had been a student there, and the last time he attended school was in the winter 2023 semester. In an interview with the suspect's relative, Febrio Dezoisa's aunt, she stated that the family had been so nice to him. She says the accused is her brother's oldest son and came to Canada 2 years ago. She described her nephew as quiet and a good student. She was visibly shaken and said, "They were such a wonderful family." She confirmed that Wickramasinghe had been working to move his family from Sri Lanka to Ottawa and invited Dezoisa to live with him at the Berrigan Drive house once his family came over. She says Dezoisa stayed with relatives in Ottawa before moving in with the Wickramasinghe family, but also mentioned that he recently cut off his relatives. It's obvious that the Wickramasinghe family had been nothing but good to Febrio, so what then could have made him kill the entire family, leaving Mr. Wickramasinghe severely injured? Is there dirty linen yet to be unveiled? Dezoisa arrived in Canada 2 years ago. He lived with his aunt during his first month in the country, then later met Wickramasinghe at Algonquin. Then suddenly, he seemed to break off all contact with his relatives, blocking their phone numbers and social media accounts. He took actions that displayed his possible desire to remain in isolation, detaching himself from those who cared about him and from those who were the only family he had in Canada. While some established newspapers have relied on Canadian or international reporting for their coverage, there has also been original reporting in Sri Lanka, since Febrio lived most of his life and has his roots there. Journalists sought out family members connected to the victims. The killings have also produced various speculations about the motives of the accused, both on social media and on some news websites. Baseless rumors have floated theories blaming everything from video games to visa issues to mystical elements and superstitions, such as the Great Curse. None of the charges against Dezoisa have been proven, and the court has not had any evidence surrounding the circumstances of the crimes. To date, police have yet to identify a possible motive. The family's landlord had been dropping off luggage at the airport, en route to what he hoped would be a relaxing vacation with his family in Mexico, when he got a call from the police. What they told him was unimaginable. 6 people dead at the Ottawa townhome he rents out, including 4 young children. Harpreet Chabra, the property owner of the home, told Global News when he was reached by phone on a Friday that he did not know or have a clue that the couple had recently had a new baby and that the accused killer lived there. He claimed not to even know Febrio Dezoisa at all because he had leased out only to the family, and he didn't know that they had accommodated an additional person to live with them. Chabra is an Ottawa mortgage agent who rented out the property on Berrigan Drive in Barhaven to a family who had recently come to Canada from Sri Lanka. Chabra says he did not know Ghani Amarakun was living in the house either. According to the property owner, the Wickramasinghe family moved into the Barhaven home last summer. He says the father arrived in Canada first and waited for his wife to come with their children.
I don't know how to put this in words, like you're never prepared for these kind of calls.
The property owner describes the surviving father as a very nice guy and a good tenant. He said he was the kind of tenant who always paid his rent on time and also took good care of the house. He added and expressed his disbelief towards the terrible and unfortunate occurrence in the family. He added that he was lost for words concerning the matter. Chabra had hoped his own family's trip would be a way for his wife and children to decompress after the sudden loss of his sister-in-law, not yet 50 years old, to cancer earlier this year. This second, unexpected loss has them again mourning. He mentioned that he was trying to help his wife heal by taking her off for vacation, and that was when they heard at the airport that the terrible, sad incident had happened. Ghani Amarakun, a 40-year-old man, was said to be an acquaintance of Danushka Wickramasinghe. He was also killed by Febrio Dezoisa, but before his death and his arrival in Ottawa, he definitely must have had a life. He had only arrived in Canada 2 months before his painful demise. He left behind a wife and 2 kids in Sri Lanka before relocating to Canada. He most likely had plans to relocate them to Canada after a while as well. He used to have an active social media presence and appeared to be trying to establish himself as an entrepreneur in his new Canadian country, perhaps to support his family in Sri Lanka. A Facebook profile with the name Ghani Amarakun describes him as a sales and digital marketing consultant. He operated a business called VIP Air Tours and frequently made posts advertising Sri Lanka as a travel destination with scenic photos of the tropical island while offering to help people make travel bookings to the country. His last public post on Facebook was on February 20th, where he thanked people for their birthday wishes. On March 28th, Fabio made a brief court appearance by phone where he could only be heard stating his name and birthday and confirming his next court appearance. He was not previously charged with any crime in the country. The 19-year-old made his first court appearance while wearing a black tracksuit jacket. At the time, his lawyer Ewan Little said he had the opportunity to get quite a bit of disclosure. De Zoysa's next court appearance was then scheduled on April 18th, while his judicial pretrial was scheduled for April 17th.
I've met him over video and in person, yes.
And do you have from that meeting any sense of what may have happened to them?
I can't comment on that, I'm so sorry.
De Zoysa was ordered not to have any form of contact with a few witnesses, including the surviving husband and father. His lawyer said on March 14th that he is currently in protective custody. There was no video link available for the hearing, and De Zoysa's appearance was limited to audio only. His lawyer, Ewan Little, told the court that he had received a volume of evidence so far and had actively been holding discussions with the Crown Attorney's Office over further disclosure. The assigned prosecutor, Crown Attorney Louise Tansey, has extensive experience leading the prosecution on a number of difficult cases involving children. At a previous court appearance, Little said he had been in touch with the young man's family and that they were obviously very upset. He said they did not reside in Sri Lanka and declined to say where they lived. When asked about whether Fabio was going to undergo a mental health assessment, Little said it was probably going to be a few months from that time. He declined to comment on Fabio de Zoysa's mental state, saying he had only met with him over a video and not in person. Fabio de Zoysa's lawyer also mentioned that he has no plan to seek bail. Legal experts said that Fabio's case might take years to make its way through the justice system. Daphne Gilbert, a professor of criminal law at the University of Ottawa, clearly stated that it could take 2 to 3 years. According to her, there are a lot of other preliminary factors to contend with, including whether or not Fabio de Zoysa is fit to stand trial. She added that the first thing that would probably happen is a lot of psychiatric consultation, which would determine whether Fabio has the mental capacity to withstand the trial process. Sylvia Rich, a law professor at the University of Ottawa, noted the rule that trials must conclude within 30 months, or 2.5 years after charges are laid. Then she added that if de Zoysa is found fit to stand trial, his lawyer could raise a defense of not being criminally responsible because of a mental disorder. The investigation of the March 6 killings could also be lengthy and complicated. She said that for them to determine more about who the accused was, how he came to be in the house, and some other needed information, would definitely take some time. She continued and stated that on the outside, the entire case should be done 30 months from that period. But she added it could take less time, and de Zoysa will likely be incarcerated for the duration. But she also mentioned how slow the justice system can be, and that there are some other complicating factors such as a backlog of other cases which need to be sorted as well. The death of the Wickramasinghe family, shortly after they moved from Sri Lanka to Ottawa, Canada, hit not just the families affected, but also the neighborhood and the nation at large. On a cold, rainy Saturday morning filled with grief, tears, and disbelief, the handmade card from 7-year-old Inuka Wickramasinghe's classmates at Monsignor Paul Baxter Catholic School spelled out a community's sorrow. There were lots of colorful letters that soon began to drip away as the raindrops fell. The children that were present shared their memories. "We will miss you, Inuka." Inuka's friends had a lot to say about him. They mentioned that he was fast, kind, intelligent, imaginative, a good friend, and a soccer player. "We will miss your smile," they said. It was clear that Inuka's teacher was overcome with emotion. He wiped his tears and then set his cards among the other pile of flowers, cards, and stuffed animals. Some flickering candles were the centerpiece of the vigil for Inuka, his mother. Darshani Dilanthika Ekanyake, sisters Ashwini, Ranaya, and Kelly, and family friend Gamini Amarakun. More than 100 mourners offered tearful prayers and calls for solidarity and compassion on the 17th of March at the funeral for the Sri Lankan family slain in one of the worst mass killings in Ottawa's history. Ajahn Viradamo, a monk who spoke at the funeral, asked those grieving around the world to focus on supporting each other instead of leaning into despair or anger. Mr. Wickramasinghe was seen crying at the ceremony, his hands clasped in prayer with one finger bandaged. He was surrounded by family members, including a man sobbing into a handkerchief. He was obviously devastated and was bleeding with grief within. The funeral organizers said on the 15th of March that he had requested privacy to mourn the loss of his family, but he was thankful for the outpouring of public support since his relatives died. 5 coffins were placed at the front of the room, including 3 smaller white ones and 2 larger wooden caskets, one of which had framed photos of both Ekanayake and her baby. The ceremony included audio recordings from the wife and daughter of Gamini Amarakun and Amarakun Mudiansalag. His loved ones in Sri Lanka were unable to travel to Canada for the funeral. The service also included a Buddhist ritual, as well as reflections from preachers from various religions, who prayed for surviving relatives to have strength. Dignitaries from multiple levels of government who were present also paid their regards during the funeral. Danuska Wickramasinghe said that he was torn and devastated by the loss of his beloved wife and his children. He also mentioned that he was mourning the loss of his friend, Gamini, who was staying with the family. He thanked the first responders and hospital staff for helping him navigate through the initial shock and chaos that began as a result of the tragedy. Danuska also said that he was thankful for the support of the Buddhist Congress of Canada, Ottawa's Sri Lankan community, and the wider public for their thoughts and prayers. Money might have been the least of Danuska Wickramasinghe's worries, but at least it was a good way for the community could express their support and assure him of their presence. The following day after the brutal killing, a fundraiser with a goal of $200,000 was set up on GoFundMe to help the surviving father and family members of the deceased in Canada and Sri Lanka. Kodatuwaku, the monastery director, said 20 members of its community had set up a GoFundMe page, coordinated by the temple, to provide financial support for the families of the victims. The Buddhist Congress of Canada, BCC, facilitated the fundraiser. On the 11th of March 2024, nearly $162,000 had already been raised by over 1,100 donors. This swift, heartfelt action of the community reflected their passion, genuine grief, and intentionality towards the deceased and the man who was left behind. It was an action that definitely spoke louder than words. Anoli Fernando was a resident of Ottawa. She didn't know the family personally, but she has family ties to Sri Lanka. Her mother called her on the Thursday of the incident to tell her she'd heard of a family friend's in-laws who were victims of a tragic murder. Fernando said she doesn't often donate to charities or causes, and even though she didn't know or have any familial connection with the victims, she felt the need to help where she could, donating $1,000. According to her, she donated because it just hits close to home. Danuska Wickramasinghe displayed a rare reaction to his family's killer, Febrio de Zoisa. From his hospital bed, he managed to offer some compassion for his family's accused killer when they paid him a visit. Several other community members were able to visit Danushka Wickramasinghe, the lone survivor of the attack, in hospital. Even though he was tired and had visible physical marks from the attack, Wickramasinghe was said to have smiled as the visitors entered the hospital room. A local temple's resident monk, Bhante Sunitha, said he placed his hands on Wickramasinghe to show him the love of his community and provide him with strength. Those who spoke with Wickramasinghe said he even showed empathy for the accused killer. The news, articles, and the internet do not say much about the accused killer of the Wickramasinghe family, Febrio de Zoisa. His parents refused to share their place of residence. No friend has come out to claim that they knew him from school or somewhere else. The secrecy around this murderer is quite fascinating. Many choose to believe that all the information we need about him has been provided, while others demand to know more, especially as to why a 19-year-old boy could kill not just one, but 4 babies. There is still a thick mystery cloud surrounding this mass killing case that is yet to be unraveled. Aside from the fact that many feel horrified by the crime, some fear it could have a direct impact on their lives. The murder has also triggered warnings about welcoming strangers when staying abroad. Some people are also worried that this case might cause the Canadian government to become even more strict when accepting international students. Regardless, the love and compassion the community showed the Wickramasinghe family just after a short time of living in Ottawa shows how much impact they made in their community, even in the little time they lived there. It's quite relieving to know that Danushka Wickramasinghe, the lone survivor, has family, loyal friends, and his community to lean on during his time of grief. I will be sure to make another video after the killer goes to trial and we get a conclusion to this tragic case as more unfolds. That's all for now. What do you think about this case? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Please be sure to like the video, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to get notified when we drop new videos. Bye for now.